The smell of a modern office is always burnt coffee and fear. After 8 years in IT, I have heard every excuse, but when the new executive looked me in the eye and declared, "You are redundant," I simply nodded. In my world, redundant is not a person to be fired. It is an invalid access code, and I knew exactly who was going to be turned off first. My name is Riley Cruz. If you spend enough time in the bowels of a corporate building, you start to develop a very specific palate for the air quality. The IT department at Larkhaven Claims and Benefits did not smell like the polished mahogany and expensive cologne of the executive suites on the top floor. Down here, the air was a recycled soup of ozone, dust mites frying on the heat sinks of overworked servers, and the sharp, chemical tang of cheap carpet adhesive that had been decomposing since the late 90s. It was the scent of stagnation, seasoned with the bitterness of burnt coffee that had been sitting on a hot plate for 4 hours. To most of the people working in this building, I was just part of that furniture. I was the help desk girl. I was the voice on the other end of the line, asking if they had checked to see if the printer was actually plugged in. I was the invisible mechanic who crawled under their desks to zip-tie cables while they continued their phone calls. Talking over my head as if I were a vacuum cleaner, they saw a woman in her late 30s with sensible shoes and a lanyard that held too many keys. They did not see the person who effectively kept the heart of this entire company beating. I sat at my desk, which was really just a glorified cubicle pushed into the corner where the HVAC system hummed the loudest. My dual monitors cast a pale, artificial glow over my face, reflecting in my eyes like the dead, unblinking stare of a deep-sea fish. Around me, the server racks blinked with their rhythmic, hypnotic blue LED lights. Blink, pause, blink, pause. It was a binary lullaby that never slept. My right hand rested on the desk, fingers hovering near my ID badge. Attached to the badge was a small, black plastic fob. It was a multi-factor authentication token. Every 60 seconds, the liquid crystal display on that token generated a new 6-digit number. It was a random sequence, meaningless to anyone who did not understand cryptography. But to me, it was the most important object in the city of Mason Falls. That changing number was the second half of the key to the kingdom. It was the physical manifestation of the admin rights. People in the shiny offices upstairs did not understand what admin rights meant. To them, it was just a nuisance. It was the annoying prompt that stopped them from installing unapproved games or sketchy PDF converters on their company laptops. They viewed security protocols as hurdles to be jumped over or walls to be smashed through. They did not realize that the admin account was the master key to the hotel. It could open every door. It could read every email. It could access the unencrypted payroll files, the medical histories of claimants, and the social security numbers of every employee in the tri-state area. It was a power that remained invisible right up until the moment it was gone. The tension in the office that week was palpable, heavy enough to weigh down your shoulders. Larkhaven was staring down the barrel of a massive compliance audit. We had a client, a behemoth of an insurance underwriter, who was sending in a third-party team to scrub through our security posture. They were looking for weaknesses. They were looking for unpatched vulnerabilities, weak passwords, and unauthorized access points. If we failed, the fines would be in the millions, and the contract termination would likely bankrupt the company within 6 months. Everyone from the mailroom to the CEO was walking on eggshells, except, of course, for the people who thought the rules did not apply to them. I took a sip of my lukewarm water and minimized the window I was working on. I was not coding the next great artificial intelligence or hacking into the Pentagon. I was doing something far more valuable. I was organizing my assets. In my line of work, assets are not stocks or bonds. They are not cash in a savings account. My wealth consisted of logs, server access logs, email traffic timestamps, ticket resolution histories, and policy adherence documents. I had 8 years of digital footprints stored on secure, redundant drives. Every time a manager asked me to bypass a firewall, I made them send an email request. Every time a director demanded access to a folder they did not need, I created a ticket and documented their reason. I called it my insurance policy. The corporate world is full of people who are eager to throw the IT department under the bus when things go wrong. My job was to make sure I had the video footage of them driving the bus. A notification chimed on my primary monitor. It was a company-wide email, marked with the high-priority exclamation point that usually signaled bad news disguised as a celebration. The subject line read, "Welcome our new Chief Operating Officer." I clicked it open. The text was formatted in a cheerful, sans-serif font that felt aggressively friendly. It announced the arrival of a man named Derek Vance. The email was a masterpiece of corporate buzzwords. It spoke of synergy. It spoke of a fresh perspective. It promised a lean, agile future for Larkhaven. I scanned the paragraphs, my eyes catching on the phrases that always made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Streamlining operations, cutting the fat, optimizing redundancy. In engineering, redundancy is a good thing. It means you have a backup. It means if one engine fails, the plane can still fly. But in the language of a new executive looking to make a quick bonus, redundancy meant people like me. It meant expensive. Experienced staff who could be replaced by a cheaper outsourced contract or a piece of automated software that did not work half as well. I looked at the photo of Derek Vance attached to the email. He had the kind of smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He looked like a shark in a $3,000 suit. I had seen his type a dozen times before. They came into a company like a wrecking ball, desperate to prove their worth by slashing budgets in the first quarter. They saw it as a cost center, a black hole where money went to die, rather than the shield that protected the company from digital oblivion. He would come for me. I knew it with the same certainty that I knew the sun would rise in the east. I was the expensive veteran in the basement. I was the obstacle to his cost-saving charts. But before he could get rid of me, he would need something else. He would not just want my resignation. He would want the power I held. He would want the ability to bypass the controls, to speed up his initiatives, to make changes without waiting for approval boards or compliance checks. He would want the admin rights. I looked down at the token in my hand. The numbers flashed and changed. 4, 9, 2, 1, 1, 8. Derek Vance was about to learn a very painful lesson about the difference between authority and access. He might have the title on the door, but I held the keys to the lock. And when a man like that demands a key, he is not qualified to hold. He usually ends up locking himself out of the only room that matters. I closed the email and went back to work. The audit was coming, and I had a feeling I was going to need every single line of those logs. The smell of the office seemed to change then, shifting from stale coffee to the distinct, electric scent of a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. I was not going to be the victim in this story. I was the firewall, and firewalls do not burn. The first time Derek Vance stepped into the IT department, the air pressure in the room seemed to drop, as if a vacuum seal had been broken. He did not knock. He did not pause at the threshold to gauge whether we were in the middle of a crisis or a delicate server migration. He simply flowed into the room, propelled by the sheer force of his own self-importance. If the office usually smelled of stale coffee and ozone, Derek brought with him a cloud of fragrance that cost more than my first car. It was a sharp, aggressive musk that assaulted the sinuses, the kind of scent worn by men who believe that dominance is a smell. He was wearing a navy blue suit that was tailored so precisely it looked painted on, and his shoes clicked against the linoleum floor with a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a ticking clock. I did not stand up. I was in the middle of patching a vulnerability in the payroll database, a task that required the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb disposal. Derek stopped at the edge of my desk. He did not look at me. He looked at the monitors. He scanned the lines of code and the cascading system logs with a dismissive sneer, as if he were looking at a pile of dirty laundry rather than the digital infrastructure of the company he had just been hired to save. "Riley," he said. It was not a question. He made my name sound like a line item on a budget sheet that he was eager to cross out with a red marker. I finally spun my chair around. "Mr. Vance, welcome to the basement." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold and flat, like polished stones. Let's not get bogged down in pleasantries. I am on a tight schedule. I have been reviewing the operational expenditures for this department, and I have to say, the numbers are alarming. We are bleeding capital down here. He began to pace the small length of my workspace, gesturing with hands that were manicured to perfection. We need to talk about synergy, he continued, tossing the word out like a grenade. This company is bloated. It is sluggish. My mandate is to introduce lean methodologies. We need to be agile. And frankly, maintaining an internal server farm and a dedicated staff for what is essentially utility work, it is archaic. I kept my face perfectly neutral. We handle sensitive medical claims. Mr. Vance? HIPAA compliance requires strict control over our data. Outsourcing introduces third-party risk vectors that... He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Risk is just an excuse for inaction. I have friends in Silicon Valley who run entire empires from a laptop in a coffee shop. We are going to pivot. I want to see a proposal for migrating everything to a managed service provider by the end of the month. We need to trim the fat. I blinked. There it was again. Fat. I will note your request, I said, my voice steady. But right now, we are in a code freeze for the upcoming audit. Major infrastructure changes are prohibited until the auditors sign off. Derek stopped pacing and leaned over my desk. He invaded my personal space, his expensive cologne momentarily drowning out the smell of the dusty carpet. That brings me to my next point, he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that made my skin crawl. To make these decisions, to truly understand the holistic picture of this organization, I need full visibility. I want you to set me up with an administrator account, full privileges. I need to be able to see everything, from the financial backend to the user activity logs. I cannot steer the ship if I am blindfolded. My internal alarm bells began to ring so loudly I was surprised he could not hear them. He was asking for the keys to the kingdom. He wanted the ability to modify, delete, and copy data without restriction. Mr. Vance, I said, leaning back slightly. Larkhaven operates on the principle of least privilege. It is a core tenet of our security policy. Access is granted based on role and necessity. As COO, you have access to all operational reports, financial dashboards, and executive summaries. You do not need back-end administrative access to the servers or the raw database tables. In fact, giving you that access would be a violation of our compliance protocols right before an audit. His smile vanished instantly. The mask of the charming, modern executive slipped, revealing the petulant tyrant underneath. He straightened up, adjusting his silk tie with a sharp tug. I am the Chief Operating Officer, he stated, enunciating every syllable. I do not think you understand the hierarchy here. I am not asking for permission. I am giving you an instruction. And I am the systems administrator, I replied, refusing to break eye contact. My job is to protect the company, even from itself. If I give you that access, I have to document it. The auditors will flag it. They will ask why an executive needs root access. It opens us up to liability. Derek laughed. It was a short, barking sound that lacked any humor. He turned his head, looking toward the open door where a few junior analysts were walking by. He wanted an audience. You know, he said, loud enough for them to hear. This is exactly why we need to clean house. You legacy employees are so obsessed with your little rules that you forget who signs your paychecks. You are just the help desk girl. Riley, your job is to reset passwords and make sure the Wi-Fi works. Do not presume to lecture me on liability. Just do as you are told. The insult hung in the air. Thick and toxic. Help desk girl. He had stripped away my title, my experience, and my authority in 2 words. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I forced my breathing to remain even. I would not give him the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. I will send you the request form for elevated privileges, I said, my voice icy. You can fill it out, list the business justification, and submit it to compliance for approval. If they sign off, I will grant the access. Derek stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working as he ground his teeth. He realized I had cornered him with bureaucracy, the one weapon he could not bully his way through. "Fine," he spat. "Send the form, but do not think this conversation is over." He turned to leave, but then he paused, as if remembering something. A smirk returned to his face, more dangerous than before. "Oh, and Riley, I have brought on a new director of strategic initiatives. She is going to be helping me streamline these processes since you seem so overwhelmed." He stepped aside and motioned to the hallway. A woman walked in. She looked young, perhaps 25, with terrified eyes and a designer handbag that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She looked like she had gotten lost on her way to a fashion shoot. "This is Kyla Vance," Derek announced. The name landed with the subtlety of a brick through a window. Vance. He had hired a relative. Nepotism was not just a red flag. In a highly regulated industry like ours, it was a flashing neon sign screaming conflict of interest. "Kyla is going to be my eyes and ears," Derek said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She needs full system access as well. She will be auditing the user permissions." I looked at Kyla. She was chewing her lip, looking at the server racks with a mixture of confusion and boredom. "Does Kyla have experience with database administration or identity management systems?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. "Kyla is a fast learner," Derek snapped. "Get her a laptop, the best one we have, and set her up with the same access profile I requested. We have work to do." They turned and walked out together, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and impending disaster. I turned back to my screens, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled up the HR notification system. Kyla Vance, Position Director of Strategic Initiatives. Reports to Derek Vance. Qualifications listed, none provided yet. 10 minutes later, a ticket appeared in my queue. It was from Derek, demanding super user status for Kyla Vance. He had marked it as critical urgency. He had bypassed the manager approval field, simply writing, "Per COO directive," in the justification box. I stared at the screen. Giving someone like Derek administrative access was dangerous because he was malicious, but giving someone like Kyla administrative access was dangerous because she was ignorant. I imagined handing a loaded gun to a toddler. No, it was worse than that. It was like handing a child a high-pressure water gun, except instead of water, the tank was filled with hydrofluoric acid. She could dissolve the foundations of this company without even realizing she had pulled the trigger. I did not grant the access immediately. Instead, I opened a new folder on my secure drive. I named it Vance Dossier. I took a screenshot of the ticket. I exported the email where he called me a help desk girl. I noted the time and date of Kyla's arrival. Derek Vance wanted to play games with access levels. He wanted to bypass the rules. He thought I was just an obstacle to be removed. He did not realize that by forcing me to document his stupidity, he was handing me the ammunition I would eventually use to bury him. I clicked on the ticket, but instead of hitting approve, I hit pending clarification. I typed a query asking for specific modules she needed to access, citing the impending audit. It was a stalling tactic. It would buy me a day, maybe 2, but the clock was ticking. The toxicity had entered the room, and it was already starting to corrode the wires. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the office shifted from tense to suffocating. It was no longer just the smell of burnt coffee. It was the scent of a machine being stripped for parts while it was still running. Derek Vance did not waste time. He called it optimization. I called it sabotage. He started slashing the budget with a machete. First, it was the training budget for my 2 junior analysts. Then, he canceled the contract for our off-site backup storage, claiming the cloud solution was redundant, ignoring the fact that our compliance policy required a physical backup for disaster recovery. But the most terrifying cut came on a Tuesday morning. I received a notification that the renewal for our endpoint protection software had been denied. I marched into his office, a printout in my hand. He was on the phone, laughing loudly about a golf handicap, feet up on the mahogany desk. When he saw me, he waved a dismissive hand, signaling me to wait. I stood there for 5 minutes, listening to him brag about a bottle of scotch that cost $300. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with exaggerated patience. Riley, he sighed. What is the crisis now? You canceled the antivirus and intrusion detection renewal, I said, placing the paper on his desk. The license expires in 48 hours. If we go dark, every laptop in this company is a sitting duck. We process claims with social security numbers. We cannot operate without this. He picked up the paper, glanced at the cost, and chuckled. $40,000 a year for a program that just runs in the background. It is a scam. Riley, we have firewalls. Do we not? I am not paying for invisible insurance. Let it expire. We will find a cheaper vendor next quarter. Next quarter. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Hackers do not wait for quarterly reviews if we are hit with ransomware. If, he interrupted, his voice hardening. You IT people live in a world of hypothetical disasters. I live in the real world of profit and loss. The decision stands. Now, get out. I walked back to my desk, my hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from rage. The system was still running, blinking its steady blue rhythm, but I knew the walls were coming down. That afternoon, the requests started coming in. Derek sent me an instant message. Riley, I need the master password for the legacy claims database, the one with the archived client settlements. I am doing a historical analysis for the board. I stared at the screen. That database contained sensitive financial settlements going back 10 years. It was encrypted for a reason. I typed back, Mr. Vance, I cannot share the master password. That is against the Identity Access Management policy. If you need specific reports, I can generate them for you, or if you need direct access, please submit a formal request form so I can provision a unique user ID for you with read-only permissions. His reply was instantaneous. Stop throwing red tape at me. We are a team. Just email it to me. I need to move fast. I took a screenshot of the chat. I saved it to the folder labeled Vance Dossier. Then I replied, I require a written directive via email stating that you are ordering me to bypass security protocol, acknowledging the risk involved. He did not reply. The chat window closed, but the pressure did not stop there. It shifted to Kyla. Kyla Vance, the Director of Strategic Initiatives, began flooding the ticketing system. Her tickets were always marked with high urgency, flagged in bright red. Subject access required immediately. Body need full administrative rights to the HR folder to review staffing efficiency. Subject urgent. Body need export of all vendor payment routing numbers for audit prep. I looked at the requests. They were sloppy. They were broad. A director of strategy did not need raw banking data or the ability to edit employee personnel files. I denied the first three, citing lack of specific business justification. Then I noticed the pattern. Kyla was submitting these tickets at 4:55 in the afternoon on Fridays, or during the lunch hour when she thought I might be away from my desk. She was fishing. She was hoping to catch a junior analyst off guard who would just click approve to clear the queue before the weekend. I sent a memo to my team, no access approvals for Kyla Vance without my direct sign-off. No exceptions. But the real twist came late one Wednesday night. I was working late, manually patching a server because our automated tools had been optimized out of existence. The office was empty, the lights dimmed to the emergency backup glow. I had a script running to monitor active sessions, just watching the lines of text scroll by like a digital waterfall. Suddenly, a line caught my eye. User SVC printer 04 action accessing directory, finance, accounts payable, 2025. Q1. Time 10:42 p.m. I frowned. SVC's printer 04 was a service account. It was a non-human identity created solely so the fourth-floor copier could communicate with the network. Service accounts are dumb. They do one thing. They scan documents. They do not browse the accounts payable folder. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Someone was using the printer's credentials to tunnel into the finance drive. It was a clever trick. Most security systems ignore service accounts because they are trusted internal traffic. I traced the session. The IP address originated from inside the building, but it was being masked. However, whoever was doing this was arrogant. They had not bothered to clear the temporary cache. I dug deeper, peeling back the layers of the connection. The session wasn't coming from a printer. It was coming from a laptop with the MAC address ending in 4F2A. I checked my asset inventory list. Device ID LXX02. Assigned to Derek Vance. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the room screaming in my ears. Derek was using a compromised service account to snoop around files he could not officially access yet because I was blocking him. He was bypassing his own identity to hide his tracks. I did not terminate the connection, not yet. If I kicked him out now, he would know I was watching. Instead, I enabled verbose logging. I set the system to record every single file he opened, every document he copied, and every timestamp. I let him dig his own grave. The next morning, Derek decided to make an example of me. He called an impromptu stand-up meeting in the middle of the open plan workspace. He gathered the department heads, Kyla standing faithfully by his side holding a tablet she clearly did not know how to use. "We have a bottleneck in this organization," Derek announced, his voice booming. He pointed a finger directly at the IT corner. "We are trying to pivot. We are trying to be agile, but every time my team tries to implement a change, we hit a wall of old-school bureaucracy." He looked at me. "Riley here thinks her job is to say no. She clings to outdated protocols like a security blanket. She is slow. She is afraid of speed. And in this market, slow is dead." The humiliation burned hot on my neck. My colleagues looked down at their shoes, afraid to meet my eyes. Derek was stripping away my professional dignity, painting me as an incompetent relic. "We need modern solutions," Derek continued, grinning at Kyla. "Not someone who hoards passwords like a dragon." I stood up. I kept my voice calm, polite, the perfect picture of the compliant employee. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Vance," I said. "My priority is simply to ensure we pass the client audit next week. Speed is important, but accuracy is what keeps our license." "The audit is a formality," he snapped. "Stop using it as a shield." Just then, a shrill, piercing alarm cut through the air. It came from the large monitor mounted on the wall of the IT section. The screen, usually a calming map of network traffic, had turned a flashing, angry red. "Alert high risk, login detected, unknown location." It was the geofencing system. Someone was trying to log into the main database from a country that was on our blacklist. The noise was deafening. "Beep, beep, beep." "What is that?" Derek shouted over the noise, covering his ears. "Turn it off. It is giving me a headache." I looked at the screen. It was a genuine brute force attack. Without the endpoint protection he had cancelled. Our outer perimeter was weaker, and the bots were banging on the door. "It is a security alert, sir," I said, stepping toward my desk. "I need to investigate." "I said turn it off," Derek roared, his face turning a shade of purple that clashed with his tie. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Noisy, disruptive, useless alarms. Kill it now. Riley, that is an order." I stopped. The room went silent, except for the rhythmic screaming of the system. I looked at Derek, then I looked at Kyla, who seemed terrified. Then I looked at the red screen. "The alarm exists to tell us the house is on fire. Mr. Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Silencing it does not put out the fire." "I do not care," he yelled. "I want a quiet office disable that feature." I sat down at my keyboard. I acknowledged the alert, dampening the sound, but keeping the visual warning active. I blocked the IP address manually, doing the job the software should have done automatically. I turned back to him. He was straightening his jacket, looking triumphant, as if he had won a battle of wills. "See," he said to the room. "Much better. You just have to be firm with the help." He walked away, taking his cloud of toxic cologne with him. I watched him go. I opened my dossier. I logged the incident. COO ordered disabling of security intrusion alarm during active attack. He thought he had won because the noise stopped. He did not understand the fundamental truth of the world he was trying to control. The person who wants to turn off the warning signs is usually the person who is about to do something that deserves a warning. And Derek Vance was not just ignoring the fire. He was walking around with a bucket of gasoline. Monday morning began with a mandatory town hall meeting in the main conference room, a glass-walled aquarium that Derek Vance had decided was the perfect stage for his performance. The room smelled of dry erase markers and the nervous sweat of 50 employees who were all wondering if their keycards would still work by Friday. Derek stood at the head of the table, flanked by a projector screen displaying a slide titled, "The Future of Larkhaven Agility Through Automation." He wore a fresh suit, a shade of charcoal gray that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. He did not look like a man tasked with difficult decisions. He looked like a man about to unveil a new sports car. "We are carrying too much weight," Derek said, his voice smooth and practiced. He paced back and forth, making eye contact with everyone except me. "To run fast, we must run light. We have processes here that are 20 years old. We have roles that were created for a world that no longer exists. We have redundancy." He said the word with a smile. It was a bright, teeth-baring smile that did not convey warmth, but rather the predatory satisfaction of a wolf spotting a limping deer. "Automation is not the enemy," he continued, gesturing to a clip art graphic of a robot shaking hands with a human. "It is liberation. We are going to liberate our budget from legacy costs so we can invest in growth. Some roles will change. Some will be absorbed. It is the natural evolution of business." I sat in the back row, my notebook open. I was not taking notes on his speech. I was writing down the timestamp of when he looked directly at the IT department while saying the words, "legacy costs." After the meeting, the dismantling of my career began in earnest. It was not a firing squad. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. By Tuesday afternoon, my access to the project management dashboard had been revoked. I received an automated email stating that my role had been updated. I was no longer the lead systems administrator. I was now listed as support analyst, transition team. Derek called me into his office 10 minutes later. He did not offer me a seat. "Riley, we are shifting your focus," he said, not looking up from his phone. "I want you to offload the heavy lifting. You are bogged down in the weeds. From now on, your primary objective is knowledge transfer. I want you to get Kyla up to speed on the back-end architecture." I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. "You want me to train Kyla?" "She is the director of strategic initiatives," Derek said. "She needs to understand the tools she is managing. Show her the ropes. Teach her how the engine works." He was asking me to dig my own grave and then hand the shovel to the person who would bury me. "Understood," I said. The next 3 days were an exercise in controlled humiliation. I sat in my cramped cubicle with Kyla Vance, who pulled up a chair and placed her iced latte on top of a stack of server hard drives. "So," she said, popping a piece of gum, "Derek said you have to show me the cloud." "We are not fully on the cloud, Kyla," I said, keeping my voice level. "We use a hybrid environment. These are local servers." She frowned. "But Derek said we are going digital. Why do we have these big black boxes? Can we just throw them away?" I closed my eyes for a second, counting to 3. "No, these boxes hold the encryption keys for the patient data. If you throw them away, we go to federal prison." "Oh," she said, looking bored. "Well, just show me how to get into the files. Like, where are the passwords?" It went on like this for hours. I walked her through the basics of identity management, explaining concepts that a first-year computer science student would find elementary. She took notes on a bright pink notepad, writing down things like VPN equals secret tunnel and firewall equals the no-no wall. It was like handing a loaded assault rifle to a teenager who thought it was a selfie stick. She did not care about the safety mechanisms. She just wanted to know where the trigger was. Then came the third twist. On Thursday, while Kyla was in the bathroom, her laptop chimed with an email notification. I would never normally look at another user's screen, but the subject line caught my eye. It was from an external domain, OmniStream Solutions. Subject contract draft. Full access provisions. I froze. I knew OmniStream. They were a third-rate IT vendor known for cutting corners and outsourcing their labor to unsecured server farms overseas. I quickly glanced at the preview pane. The email was addressed to Derek, with Kyla CC'd. Derek, per our discussion, we have drafted the language granting OmniStream full administrative root access to the Larkhaven network effective immediately upon signing. We can start the migration on Monday. My blood ran cold. Derek had promised an external vendor full root access. He had done this without a security review. He had done this without a legal risk assessment. And worse, he was planning to give them the keys before the contract was even vetted by our internal counsel. This was not just bad management. This was gross negligence. When Kyla returned, I was typing furiously on my own keyboard, my face a mask of concentration. I added the email subject line and the sender to the folder named Vance Dossier. Later that afternoon, Derek cornered me at my desk. The veneer of polite corporate speak was starting to crack. He looked agitated. "Riley," he demanded, "I need the list." "Which list, Mr. Vance?" "The passwords," he hissed, lowering his voice. "The master list, the router logins, the server admin codes, the database keys. Put them in an Excel sheet and email it to me. I need to send it to our new partners so they can hit the ground running next week." I stared at him, genuinely stunned by his ignorance. "Mr. Vance?" I said slowly, loudly enough for the junior analyst to hear. "There is no list. We do not keep passwords in a text file or a spreadsheet. That is a violation of every security standard in the industry. We use an encrypted vault. Access is granted via individual tokens, like the one on my badge. I cannot just email you a list of keys. They do not exist in that format." His face turned a mottled shade of red. "Do not lie to me. You just want to hoard the access. You are obstructing a strategic partnership." "I am following the protocol that keeps this company insurable," I replied. "If I create a list like that and email it, and that email is intercepted, we lose everything. I will not do it." Derek slammed his hand on my desk partition. The plastic rattled. "You are being incredibly difficult. Riley," he spat. "I have heard the rumors, but I did not think it was this bad. You are anti-innovation. You are the reason this department is failing." He spun on his heel and stormed off. Within 2 hours, the atmosphere in the office shifted. I went to the break room to get water, and conversation died the moment I walked in. 2 women from HR were whispering by the microwave. They looked at me, then looked away quickly. I heard snippets as I walked back to my desk. "Derek says she is refusing to train the new team. Heard she is sabotage-prone. Bitter because she is old school." Derek was controlling the narrative. He was painting me as the disgruntled, obsolete employee who was terrified of change. He was turning the company against me so that when he finally fired me, everyone would nod and say it was for the best. I sat down at my desk. My badge lay on the surface, the token blinking its silent, changing code. 7309112. I felt like an old piece of furniture that had been dragged out to the curb for trash collection. I felt the sting of their judgment, the injustice of being labeled a problem when I was the only solution they had left. But I did not cry. I did not storm into his office to defend my honor. I opened my secure chat client. I scrolled down to a contact that I had not messaged in 6 months, Renee Calder, the head of compliance. Renee was a woman who had zero sense of humor and a terrifying dedication to the rulebook. She was the one person Derek could not charm and could not bully. I typed a message. "Renee, I suspect there may be some significant deviations from the standard operating procedures occurring next week regarding access controls and third-party vendor onboarding. If anything unusual happens, please keep your schedule open for me." I hit send. Let Derek Vance have his rumors. Let him have his flashy meetings and his ignorant protégés. He was playing a social game. I was playing a compliance game. And in the world of corporate liability, the person with the best documentation always wins. If the previous weeks had been about survival, this week was about ballistics. I stopped being the victim who was losing her job and started being the sniper who was calculating wind speed and elevation. In the old days, a disgruntled employee would build a physical binder. They would print out emails, punch holes in paper, and hide a heavy folder in their gym bag. But I was not living in the paper age, and I certainly was not going to risk being stopped by security with a bag full of stolen corporate documents. My dossier was digital, encrypted, and buried so deep in the metadata of the server logs that you would need an electron microscope to find it. I started compiling the final timeline. I did not just save emails, I saved the headers. I saved the routing information that proved exactly which device had sent a message and at what time. When Derek Vance sent a directive at 2 a.m, I logged it. When he claimed he was in a strategy meeting but his login location showed him at a golf course resort IP address, I logged that too. Every instruction he gave me to bypass security was cataloged. Every time he mocked a compliance standard, I took a snapshot. It was meticulous work. It was boring work. But it was the kind of work that wins lawsuits. On Wednesday morning, the system flagged an anomaly that made my pulse quicken. I was reviewing the Active Directory group memberships, a routine task that most admins automate. I noticed a subtle change in the permission hierarchy. Kyla Vance, the Director of Strategic Initiatives, who still thought the cloud was a literal atmospheric condition, had been added to the Enterprise Schema Admins group. This was the nuclear football of our network. Being in this group meant you could change the fundamental DNA of the entire database structure. If you deleted something here, it did not just go to the recycle bin, it ceased to exist across the entire universe of our network. I checked the modification log. The change had not been made by me. It had been made by a junior admin named Kevin, a sweet kid fresh out of college who was terrified of his own shadow. I walked over to Kevin's desk. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Kevin," I said softly, "why is Kyla in the Schema Admins group?" He swallowed hard. "Mr. Vance came by. He stood right here. He said Kyla needed to audit the architecture, and if I did not add her, I was obstructing a C-level executive. He said he would fire me on the spot." I nodded. I did not scold him. I did not reverse the change. If I removed her now, Derek would claim I was sabotaging his team. "It is okay, Kevin," I said. "Send me an email stating exactly what you just told me. Copy the ticket number." "Are you going to fix it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," I replied. "I'm going to flag it." I went back to my desk and opened the compliance dashboard. I did not block Kyla's access. Instead, I attached a policy violation warning tag to her user ID. This meant that every single mouse click she made would be recorded in high-definition forensic detail. It also meant that her account was now glowing like a radioactive isotope on the back-end audit reports that Renee Calder would review next week. Then came the money. Twist number 4 arrived in the form of a purchase order. The system notified me of a high-priority data transfer request involving the vendor OmniStream. They were the third-party company Derek was bringing in to replace us. Usually, setting up a new vendor takes 30 days. We have to do background checks, security assessments, and legal reviews. The first payment is never released until the contract is countersigned by legal. But I saw a transfer authorization for $50,000 processed at 9 o'clock that morning. I drilled down into the approval workflow. The payment had bypassed the standard 3-tier check. It had been fast-tracked, and the person who clicked approve was not the CFO. It was not the controller. It was an account belonging to the VP of Finance, a man named Robert Halloway. The problem was, Robert Halloway was currently on a trekking vacation in the Andes Mountains. I knew this because I had set up his out-of-office auto-reply myself. He had zero internet access. Someone was using Robert's credentials to push money out the door to Derek's friends. I did not stop the transfer. I let the money leave the building. Once that cash crossed state lines, this stopped being a policy violation and started becoming wire fraud. I simply took a screenshot of the login timestamp, cross-referenced it with Robert's vacation request form, and added it to the dossier. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the office was brittle. Derek was realizing that despite his title, he could not simply command the computers to obey him. The policies I had built over 8 years were acting like a soft cage. He would try to access a file, and a pop-up would ask for a justification code. He would try to install software, and the system would demand an admin credential he did not have. He was the captain of the ship, but he could not figure out how to unlock the steering wheel. I saw him storming around the office, his face a tight mask of frustration. He cornered Kevin again. He yelled at the facilities manager. He was looking for a shortcut, a way to bypass the redundant woman in the corner who kept citing protocols. I began my final preparations. I initiated the break glass protocol in IT security. A break glass account is exactly what it sounds like. It is an emergency account with ultimate power, to be used only when the building is burning down and the normal admins are incapacitated. It is the fire axe behind the pane of glass. I created 2 of them. I generated complex, 20-character passwords that looked like someone had smashed their face against a keyboard. I sealed these passwords in a digital envelope that could only be opened by the simultaneous digital signatures of the CEO and the head of compliance. I was packing my parachute, but I was also rigging the plane so that anyone who tried to fly it without reading the manual would crash immediately. Late Friday afternoon, I was in the server room, checking the physical backups one last time. The server room is loud, filled with the roar of cooling fans, but it is also isolated. The walls are thin where they connect to the executive hallway. I heard voices. "It is taking too long," a man said. It was the slimy voice of the OmniStream representative. "We need full control by Monday if we are going to bill you for the migration." I know, Derek's voice replied. He sounded impatient, agitated. "She has blocked me at every turn. Every time I ask for a password, she recites some regulation." "Just get rid of her," the other man said. "What is the holdup?" I stood perfectly still, my ear pressed against the cold metal of a server rack. "Monday," Derek said. "I am doing it Monday morning. HR has the paperwork ready. I am firing her for performance issues and insubordination. Once she is out of the building, I will take her laptop and we will crack it. I want full control by noon on Monday." "Good," the OmniStream guy said. "We cannot implement the new fee structure until we control the admin route." I exhaled slowly. The timeline was set. Monday morning. I walked back to my desk for the last time that week. I looked at the little token on my chest. It had been my constant companion for 8 years. It was the symbol of my stewardship. Derek Vance thought he was cleaning house. He thought he was removing a stubborn, rusty hinge that was keeping the door from opening. He thought that once I was gone, the door would swing wide and he could loot the castle. He was making a fundamental error in engineering. He thought I was the latch. He was about to discover that I was actually the lock. And when you destroy the lock, the door does not open. It seals shut forever. Monday morning arrived with the heavy, inevitable gravity of a sentencing hearing. The email summoning me to the executive conference room landed in my inbox at exactly 8 o'clock. The subject line was blank. It did not need a title. I knew what it was. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow sip, and then placed it deliberately on my desk. I locked my workstation. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I did not say goodbye to Kevin or the other analysts. There was no need for theatrics. I simply walked down the hallway, the sound of my heels on the carpet counting down the seconds to the end of my career at Larkhaven. When I opened the glass door to the conference room, the tableau was exactly as I had anticipated. Derek Vance sat at the head of the table. He was leaning back, his arms crossed, projecting an air of relaxed dominance. To his right sat Trina Sloan, the Director of Human Resources. Trina looked pale. She was shuffling a stack of papers with nervous, trembling fingers and refusing to look at the door. But there was a third person in the room. He was a stranger, a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit with a laptop bag slung over the back of his chair. He had the hungry, impatient look of a scavenger bird waiting for roadkill. I recognized the logo on his bag, OmniStream. I closed the door behind me and remained standing. "Sit down, Riley," Derek said. He did not gesture to a chair. It was a command, not an offer. I prefer to stand. Thank you, I replied. My voice was steady. It sounded far calmer than I felt. Derek shrugged. Suit yourself. Let's make this quick. We have a lot of work to do today. He glanced at Trina. She cleared her throat, her eyes fixed on the watermark of the paper in front of her. Riley, Trina began, her voice thin and reedy. As you know, the company is undergoing a strategic restructuring. We have been evaluating the efficiency of all departments. Unfortunately, due to the implementation of new automated systems and external partnerships, your position as lead systems administrator has been determined to be no longer necessary. She paused, swallowing hard before delivering the final blow. Your role has been made redundant. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. The word hung in the air. Redundant. I looked at Derek. He was smiling. It was a small, tight smile of victory. He thought he had won. He thought he had cut the cord. I see, I said. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not ask for a second chance. Do you have the termination notice in writing? I require a signed copy stating the specific cause for termination is redundancy. Trina nodded quickly, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany table. It is all in here, standard severance package, 2 weeks of pay in exchange for a signed waiver of liability. I did not touch the folder. I looked at the stranger. And who is this? I asked. This is Greg, Derek interrupted, leaning forward. Greg is the senior engineer from OmniStream. He is taking over your duties, and that brings us to the most important part of this meeting. Derek stood up. He walked around the table until he was standing just a few feet from me. He held out his hand, palm up. I want your badge, he said, and I want the access, right now. Give me the administrative credentials, all of them, the root passwords, the encryption keys, everything. Greg here needs to start the migration immediately. The room went silent. Greg leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He was ready to grab the keys to the castle. I looked at Derek's hand, then up at his face. I cannot do that, I said. Derek's face darkened instantly. Excuse me. You are fired. Riley, you do not get to say no. You are company property until you walk out that door. Hand over the access, or I will have security drag you out, and we will sue you for data theft. It is not about refusal. Mr. Vance, I said, turning slightly to address Trina. It is about compliance, according to the Larkhaven Information Security Policy, specifically Section 4, Paragraph 2. Administrative privileges can only be transferred to a vetted, authorized employee with the appropriate security clearance. I pointed at Greg. This man is not an employee. He has not undergone a background check. He has not signed a non-disclosure agreement with our legal department. And you, Mr. Vance, do not have a technical user profile in the system that is authorized to hold root privileges. If I give you those passwords right now, on a piece of paper or verbally, I am committing a gross violation of the data protection laws. I would be personally liable for the breach. Twist number 5 hit the room like a physical blow. Trina Sloan stopped shuffling her papers. Her head snapped up. She looked from me to Derek, panic widening her eyes. Derek, Trina said, her voice rising in alarm. She is right. You cannot just take the passwords. If the auditors find out we handed root access to an unvetted contractor during a termination meeting, they will fail us instantly. It is a Tier 1 violation. Derek spun around to glare at Trina. I am the COO. I am authorizing it. The auditors answer to me. The auditors answer to the federal government. Derek, Trina snapped, her HR instincts finally overriding her fear of him. We cannot do it that way. We need a chain of custody. Derek turned back to me, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He looked like he wanted to hit me. He was used to bullying people, not policies. Fine, he spat. Then transfer them to me. Create a user for me right now. Make me the admin. I do not care how you do it. Just get it done. I can do that, I said calmly. But we have to do it properly. We have to follow the offboarding and privilege transfer protocol. We need to log into the system. I need to formally reassign the master admin role to your account, and you need to accept the digital certificate of responsibility. It has to be done on a secure terminal. Witnessed by HR. I looked at Trina. Trina, for the sake of business continuity, we must ensure that the handover is seamless. If I just leave without formally transferring the role, the system might lock down. We should do it right here, right now. I can fetch a laptop. It was a trap, wrapped in the guise of helpful cooperation. Derek looked at Greg. Greg shrugged. She is technically right, the contractor muttered. If the encryption keys are tied to her user ID, we need her to migrate them before she leaves. Otherwise, we are locked out. Derek ran a hand through his hair. Frustrated, but cornered. He needed the keys. He was so close he could taste it. Go get the laptop, Derek growled. You have 5 minutes. Trina, put it in the minutes that she is cooperating. I want this done. I will be right back, I said. I walked out of the room. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. He had taken the bait. He was so obsessed with the idea of redundancy that he did not understand the nature of the system he was trying to conquer. He thought the transfer of power was just a formality, a signature on a page. He did not know that by accepting the role of administrator, he was not just accepting power. He was accepting the history of every action taken on the network. He was accepting the responsibility for every file, every login, and every violation. I went to my desk. I picked up my laptop. I did not say a word to anyone. I walked back into the conference room and placed the machine on the table. I plugged it into the network port. The screen flickered to life, the blue light reflecting on the polished wood. Okay, I said, typing in my credentials. Let us proceed with the transfer. Trina watched nervously. Greg leaned in, hungry for the data. Derek stood over my shoulder, breathing heavily, his presence looming and toxic. Make me the master, Derek said. Give me everything. As you wish, I replied. I opened the admin console. I navigated to the roles management screen. I located the user profile for Derek Vance. I was about to give him exactly what he asked for, and in doing so, I was going to ensure that his career ended exactly 3 minutes after mine did. The silence in the conference room was the kind that usually precedes a natural disaster. It was heavy, pressurized, and filled with the static electricity of impending doom. I sat at the head of the table, my fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard. On the screen, the blinking cursor of the command line interface waited for my final input. Okay, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. I am initiating the formal handover protocol. Trina, please note the time. It is 9:15 in the morning. Trina Sloan, the HR director, nodded jerkily. She was scribbling furiously on her notepad, documenting every breath I took. She knew, deep down, that something was wrong. She knew that handing the keys to the kingdom to a man like Derek Vance without a safety net was a career-ending move, but she was too afraid to stop it. Derek stood behind me, his expensive suit jacket rustling as he leaned in. He smelled of mints and aggression. Stop stalling, he muttered close to my ear. Just transfer the permissions. I am following the checklist. Mr. Vance, I said, pointing to the window open on the left side of the screen. Step 1, revoke current administrator privileges. Step 2, reassign root access to the designated executive authority. Step 3, clear all temporary and shadow permissions to ensure a clean state. Fine, he waved a hand impatiently. Just make sure my name is on the final ticket. I typed in the command. Revoke user R. Cruz. A line of green text scrolled down the screen confirming that I had just stripped myself of the power I had held for 8 years. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. I was no longer the shield. I was no longer the wall. I was just a civilian. Now, I said, I am reassigning the global admin role. This was the pivot point. Derek assumed I was typing his username, but the policy, the one he had never bothered to read, because he was too busy optimizing, stated clearly that in the event of an abrupt administrator termination, the root access must revert to the break-glass account. This account was legally owned by the Chief Compliance Officer and the CIO role. Since we currently had no CIO, the ownership defaulted strictly to the highest compliance tier. I typed assign role root admin to BG Compliance Vault. I hit enter. "What is that?" Derek asked sharply, pointing at the screen. "That is not my user ID. That is the holding account," I explained calmly, not looking up. "The system cannot assign root privileges directly to a standard user profile like yours. Derek, it has to go to the vault first. Once it is there, you can claim it using your executive credentials, assuming they are valid." "Whatever," he grunted. "Just finish it." "One last step," I said. Cleaning the environment, I executed the final script. This was the one that mattered. Over the last few weeks, Derek and Kyla had forced me to grant them piecemeal permissions, little backdoors, and temporary access tokens so they could snoop around files they had no business seeing. They were shadow rights, existing outside the standard hierarchy. My script identified every permission that did not align with the strict zero-trust model we were auditing for. Clean orphaned permissions true. I hit the return key with a solid, satisfying clack. The screen flashed. A progress bar zipped from 0 to 100% in a heartbeat. "Done," I said, closing the laptop lid. "My access is gone. The admin role has been transferred. The system is now operating strictly on the default security protocols." I stood up and pushed the chair back. "I believe that concludes my employment." Derek grinned. It was a wide, predatory grin. He turned to Greg, the OmniStream contractor, who had been watching with hungry eyes. "All right, Greg," Derek said, rubbing his hands together. "Hook your machine up. Let's start the migration. I want to see everything." Derek pulled out his smartphone. "I am going to log into the executive dashboard and approve your entry request." I moved toward the door. I wanted to be near the exit when the atmosphere in the room shifted from oxygen to vacuum. "Trina," I said softly, "you might want to check your email for the confirmation of my termination." Derek was tapping on his phone, his brow furrowed. He tapped again, harder this time. "That is weird," he muttered. "My email is not refreshing." He swiped down on the screen. A spinning wheel of death appeared. Then, a pop-up message. "Error account not authorized." "What the hell?" Derek said, his voice rising. "The Wi-Fi must be down." "The Wi-Fi is fine," Greg said, looking at his own laptop. "I have a signal. But, wait." Greg frowned. "I cannot ping the gateway. It says connection refused." Derek looked up at me. "Riley, what did you do?" "I did exactly what you asked," I said, standing with my hand on the doorknob. "I transferred the admin role. Now the system is checking to see who is trying to use it." Derek tried to open his calendar app. It crashed. He tried to open the approval software he used to sign off on expenses. It logged him out and refused to let him back in. Suddenly, the large monitor on the wall, which was mirroring Derek's laptop screen, flashed red. A single stark message appeared in bold white letters against the crimson background. "Security alert. Privilege escalation attempt detected. User Devance. Status locked." "Locked," Derek screamed. "Why am I locked?" "Because you are not the admin." "Derek," I said, my voice cool and detached. "You are a standard user, and standard users do not have access to the root vault. When the system saw your account trying to grab the keys without the dual signature token from compliance, it identified you as a threat. It thinks you are a hacker trying to steal the company." "Fix it," he roared, slamming his phone onto the table. "Unblock me right now." "I cannot," I said, holding up my empty hands. "I am redundant. Remember, I have no access." The door to the conference room opened abruptly. Kyla Vance stood there. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was pale, and she was clutching her tablet to her chest. "Derek," she cried out, ignoring the other people in the room. "Everything is gone. My files, The shared drives, the HR folders. I cannot see anything. The screen just says, insufficient privileges. She looked at me, then back to Derek, her eyes wide with panic. And I got an email saying I am being investigated for a policy violation, she wailed. Derek, you said it was fine. You said just give me the access first and we would do the paperwork later. The silence that followed that sentence was deafening. Trina Sloan gasped. She looked at Kyla, then at Derek. Admitting to bypassing paperwork in front of the HR director and a third-party witness was the corporate equivalent of confessing to a crime while speaking into a police microphone. Shut up, Kyla, Derek hissed. No, Trina said, standing up. Her voice was shaking, but she was finally finding her spine. Did you just admit to granting access without documentation? Derek ignored her. He lunged toward the wall panel that controlled the door locks. He swiped his badge to open the main exit so he could storm out. Beep, beep, beep. The small light on the card reader turned a solid, angry red. Access denied. Derek stared at the reader. He swiped again. Red light. He swiped a third time, slamming the plastic card against the sensor. Red, red, red. My badge, he whispered. Why does my badge not work? Because the security system is integrated, I explained. It was like teaching a child why they should not touch a hot stove. When the network identifies a user as a high-level security threat, it automatically revokes physical access to secure areas to prevent data exfiltration. You are locked out of the system, Derek, and effectively, you are locked in this room until security comes to reset the panel. Derek turned to face me. His face was a mask of pure fury, veins bulging in his neck. You sabotaged me, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my face. You planted a virus. You destroyed the network. I did no such thing, I replied. Opening the door, my badge, of course, still worked for the exit, because I was merely a terminated employee, not a security threat. I simply removed the manual overrides that I had been using to keep things running smoothly for you. I let the system do exactly what it was programmed to do. It is called automated compliance. I thought you liked automation. You cannot leave, he yelled, moving toward me. Greg, the contractor, stood up and took a step back from the table. Hey, look, I did not sign up for this. If the system is locking down executive accounts, I cannot touch this network. It is a liability nightmare. Fix it, Riley, Derek pleaded, his tone shifting from anger to desperation in a split second. Just log back in, turn it back on. I will give you anything. Double severance. Triple. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me help desk girl. I looked at the man who had sneered at my years of service and called me redundant. He looked small now. He looked like a man who had cut his own parachute cords and was now screaming at the sky because gravity was doing its job. I am sorry, Derek, I said, stepping into the hallway, but I cannot help you. I am just a redundant asset. And besides, I do not have the password anymore. I let the heavy glass door swing shut. Through the pane, I saw Derek Vance pounding on the glass, his mouth moving in silent screams, trapped in the aquarium he had built for himself. I walked toward the elevator. The air in the hallway tasted sweet. It smelled of ozone and victory. But I knew this was not over. The system had reacted. But the investigation was just beginning, and I had one more stop to make before I left the building for good. The elevator doors were just starting to slide shut when a hand thrust between them, triggering the safety sensor. The doors bounced back open with a startled mechanical clunk. Standing there was Renee Calder, the chief compliance officer. Renee was a woman who moved through the office with the silent lethality of a submarine. She wore rimless glasses and an expression that suggested she found human error to be personally offensive. Do not leave the building, Riley, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. I have been terminated. Renee, I said, holding up my box of personal belongings. I have no reason to stay. You are not leaving because the building is currently in a level 4 lockdown, she replied. stepping into the elevator car to block my exit. And because the board of directors has just been notified that our primary claims database has gone dark, come with me. I followed her back toward the conference room. I did not have to ask what was happening. I could hear it. The hallway, usually quiet at this hour, sounded like the trading floor of the stock exchange during a crash. When we re-entered the glass-walled room, the scene was one of total, unmitigated chaos. Derek Vance was screaming into his cell phone, his face a glistening mask of sweat. Trina Sloan was pacing back and forth, clutching her chest. Kyla Vance was sitting in the corner, sobbing quietly into her hands, and Greg, the OmniStream contractor, was frantically typing on his laptop, sweat dripping from his nose onto the keyboard. "I cannot bypass it," Greg yelled, looking up at Derek. "The firewall is treating me like a hostile entity. It is asking for a two-factor authentication code that is being sent to, well, it is being sent to nobody, because the admin account is in the vault." "Just hack it," Derek roared, covering the microphone of his phone. "You are supposed to be the expert. Break the door down." "I cannot break it down without a valid vendor authorization token," Greg shouted back. "The system keeps asking for my contract ID. Give me the contract ID. Derek?" Trina stopped pacing. She looked at Derek. "Derek, give him the number. If we do not get the system back up in 10 minutes, we are in breach of the service level agreement." Derek froze. He looked at Greg, then at Trina, and finally his eyes landed on me standing in the doorway with Renee. We do not have a number yet," Derek stammered. Twist number 7 hit the room like a bucket of ice water. Trina's jaw dropped. "What do you mean you do not have a number?" "Legal has not signed the OmniStream contract yet," Derek admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than his screaming. "I told Greg to start early. I thought we could just backdate the paperwork once Riley was gone." "You brought an unauthorized, uninsured, unvetted contractor onto the live network," Trina screeched. Her professional HR demeanor shattered completely. "Derek, that is not a procedural error. That is corporate espionage. If the client finds out—" "The client is on the phone right now," Derek yelled, pointing at his mobile device. "It is the vice president of operations at Sentinel Insurance. They got an automated alert saying their data is under siege." He put the phone back to his ear, his voice instantly shifting into a desperate, oily charm. "Mr. Henderson, no, it is not a breach. It is a glitch. We are doing a routine upgrade. Yes, perfectly under control." He listened for a moment, and the color drained from his face until he looked like a wax statue. "Cancel," Derek squeaked. "Mr. Henderson, there is no need to talk about canceling the master service agreement. We are talking about $50 million in annual revenue. Please, just give me an hour." He hung up the phone and threw it onto the table. It slid across the mahogany and stopped right in front of me. Derek looked at me with eyes full of hate. He needed a scapegoat, and I was standing right there. "This is her fault," Derek shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Riley did this. She rigged the system to crash if she was fired. She is holding the data hostage. It is cyber terrorism." Renee Calder stepped forward. She did not look at Derek. She looked at the large monitor on the wall, which was still flashing the red access denied warning. "A hostage situation implies a demand, Derek," Renee said coolly. "Riley has made no demands. She has simply followed the offboarding procedure." "She locked me out," Derek insisted. "She knew I did not have the access." "I asked for the logs," Renee said, opening her tablet. "I have been monitoring the back-end traffic for the last 20 minutes. The system flagged a brute force entry attempt from your laptop, Derek, and then it flagged a second attempt from an unknown device." She glanced at Greg. "That would be you." "I was just doing what I was told," Greg said, raising his hands in surrender. "I am not taking the fall for this. I do not even work here officially." "Exactly," Renee said. "You do not work here, which means Derek Vance just handed the root keys of a HIPAA-compliant database to a civilian." "She tricked me," Derek yelled. sweat running down his collar. She told me to take the access. She set me up. I advised you to follow the protocol, I said calmly. You ordered me to transfer the rights immediately. I complied. You are a saboteur. Derek lunged toward the table, grabbing a stack of papers. You are trying to destroy my reputation because you are bitter about being redundant. Suddenly, Kyla spoke up from the corner. Her voice was small and trembling, but in the sudden silence of the room, it carried perfectly. But Derek, she said, wiping her eyes, you said we did not need to worry about the rules. You told me to use that printer login last week. The room went dead silent. Renee turned slowly to face Kyla. What printer login? Kyla? Kyla looked around, realizing too late that she had just pulled the pin on a grenade. The account. Derek said the approval process took too long, so he gave me a username and password on a sticky note. He said it was for the copier, but it let me into the HR files. He said it was faster. I watched Derek's face. It was a masterpiece of crumbling arrogance. He had been caught, not by me, but by his own incompetence and the loose lips of the person he had hired to replace me. Renee tapped her tablet screen. Riley, does this match the anomaly you flagged in your weekly report? Yes, Renee, I said. Service account SVC printers 04. I noticed irregular activity on it 10 days ago. I logged it, but I could not prove who was using it until now. That is a lie, Derek shouted. They are conspiring against me, Trina. Call security. I want them both removed. Trina Sloan looked at Derek. Then she looked at the red warning screen. Then she looked at me. For the first time in years, I saw respect in her eyes, and fear. She realized that if she sided with Derek now, she would be going down with the ship. I cannot do that, Derek, Trina said quietly. Why not? Because the chairman of the board just emailed me, Trina said, looking at her phone. And Renee, and you. We all checked our devices. The email was short, sharp, and terrifying. From Office of the Chairman to Executive Leadership Team Subject Emergency Session, immediate effect. The board has been notified of a critical stoppage in operations and a potential breach of contract with Sentinel Insurance. All parties are to report to the Grand Boardroom immediately. Mr. Vance, Ms. Sloan, Ms. Calder, and Ms. Cruz. Derek read the email and let out a laugh. It was a manic, breathless sound. Good, he said, straightening his jacket, though his hands were still shaking. Good. This is perfect. I will explain everything to the chairman. I will tell them how you sabotaged the company. Riley, I will have you prosecuted. You think you won? You just invited the executioner to your own funeral. He marched toward the door, shoving Greg out of his way. Kyla, get your things. We are going upstairs. He walked out with the swagger of a man who still believed his title could protect him from gravity. Renee Calder looked at me. There was the faintest ghost of a smile on her lips. Do you have your documentation? Riley? She asked. I have everything, I replied, patting my bag where my encrypted drive sat. Good, Renee said, because Derek thinks this meeting is a trial for you. He does not realize that the board does not care about feelings. They care about liability. I looked at the conference room one last time. The red light on the wall was still blinking. A silent guardian that had done exactly what I told it to do. Derek thought I was the villain of this story. He was about to find out that I was simply the narrator, and the narrator always gets the last word. Let's go, I said. I would hate to keep the chairman waiting. The grand boardroom at Larkhaven was designed to make people feel small. It was a cavernous space on the top floor, dominated by a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. The air was frigid, conditioned to a temperature that kept expensive suits crisp and minds alert. I sat at the far end of the table. To my right was Renee Calder, the chief compliance officer. Across from us sat the general counsel, a man named Mr. Sterling who had eyes like a hawk and a reputation for shredding careers. At the head of the table sat the chairman of the board, a silent, gray-haired figure who watched the proceedings with the detachment of a judge at a hanging. Derek Vance was not in the room yet. He was being held in the executive waiting area, likely rehearsing his victory speech. "Ms. Cruz," Mr. Sterling began, his voice dry. "Mr. Vance alleges that you maliciously altered the company mainframe to cause a catastrophic failure upon your termination. He claims you are holding the system hostage. How do you plead?" I did not flinch. "I plead competence, Mr. Sterling." I opened my laptop. I did not connect to the network. I was not authorized. After all, but I connected the HDMI cable to the central projector. "I am not here to give a speech," I said. "I am here to present a forensic timeline. What you are about to see is not opinion, it is metadata, and metadata does not lie." I brought up the first slide. It was a simple timeline of the last 4 weeks. "Exhibit A," I said. The date Derek Vance requested full administrative root access, November 12th. Note the time 9 in the morning on his second day. I denied this request based on the principle of least privilege. I clicked Next. Exhibit B, November 14th. A ticket submitted by Kyla Vance requesting access to the encrypted HR personnel files. Denied due to lack of business justification. 2 hours later, a service account assigned to a third-floor photocopier accessed those same files. Mr. Sterling leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Are you suggesting Mr. Vance used a printer login to read personnel files?" "I am not suggesting it," I replied, pulling up a log file. "I am proving it. The IP address of the device that used the printer login matches the MAC address of the laptop issued to Derek Vance. He bypassed the identity management protocols to access sensitive employee data without a trace. Or so he thought. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. "But here is where it gets interesting," I continued, navigating to a new folder. "This is what happened today." I displayed the logs from that morning, the chaotic moments after I had left the conference room. When I transferred the admin role to the compliance vault, the system went into a defensive posture. It locked down. That is standard behavior. However, look at this entry at 9:22 in the morning. I highlighted a line of code in red. "Command force override root user, unknown external connection result, blocked by policy 404. Twist number 8, I said softly. Someone tried to force the lock. This command is a brute force script designed to smash through the firewall. It was not a glitch. It was a deliberate attack attempted from inside the conference room. Renee Calder spoke up. "And who authorized this command?" "The script signature belongs to a toolset used by OmniStream Solutions," I said. "The contractor, Greg. He tried to break the glass from the outside, but he failed because of a policy I wrote 3 years ago. Policy 404 automatically blacklists any external IP trying to execute root commands without a countersignature." "So, Mr. Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, "you did not crash the system." "No," I said. "I saved it. If that command had worked, OmniStream would have had unrestricted, unlogged access to every social security number in our database. I did not break the car. Mr. Sterling, I just took the keys away from a drunk driver." Trina Sloan, the HR director, was sitting next to Mr. Sterling. She had been quiet, reading through the printed dossier I had provided. She looked pale. "It gets worse," Trina whispered. She held up a piece of paper. "I have been cross-referencing the emails in Riley's report. Derek kept using the word redundant. He said Riley was redundant. He said the security protocols were redundant." Trina looked at the chairman. "It was not about the budget. He needed Riley gone because she was the only one watching the gate. He fired her to clear the obstacle. The redundancy was a lie to cover up a hostile takeover of the admin rights." "And why would he want that access so badly?" the chairman asked. It was the first time he had spoken. "For this," I said. I clicked to the final slide. It was a copy of the state business registry for the vendor. OmniStream Solutions. "I did a little background check on the company Derek was so eager to hire," I said. "OmniStream Solutions was incorporated 6 months ago. It has no other clients. Its registered business address is a residential home in Delaware. I paused for effect. That address belongs to Derek Vance's brother-in-law. The air was sucked out of the room. This was no longer an IT issue. This was fraud. Derek was funneling $50,000 and likely much more in the future to a shell company owned by his family, and he needed full admin rights to hide the transaction logs. He was not optimizing the department, I stated flatly. He was looting it. Mr. Sterling closed his folder. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Renee, bring in Kyla Vance. Separately. Kyla was brought in a moment later. She looked terrified. Her mascara was running, and she was clutching her designer bag like a shield. She sat in the chair Derek was supposed to occupy. Ms. Vance, Mr. Sterling said gently, we have evidence that you accessed HR files using an unauthorized login. Can you explain that? Kyla looked at me, then at the stern faces of the board. She crumbled. Derek told me to, she blurted out. He said the IT lady was being mean and blocking us. He wrote the password on a sticky note. He said, use this, but do not tell anyone, or we will get in trouble. I did not know it was illegal. I just wanted to see the org chart. Did he tell you who OmniStream was? Renee asked. He said they were friends of the family, Kyla sobbed. He said they would help us get our bonuses faster. Thank you. Ms. Vance? Mr. Sterling said. You may wait outside. Kyla was escorted out. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It was the silence of clarity. The board understood the checkmate. I had not been the saboteur. I had been the canary in the coal mine, and when they tried to kill the canary, the mine collapsed on top of them. The system is still locked, the chairman noted. Can you fix it, Ms. Cruz? I can, I said. I can restore the admin hierarchy, revoke the OmniStream access, and normalize the traffic flow. It will take me about 10 minutes. Please do so, the chairman said, and consider your termination rescinded. We will discuss your compensation package later. Thank you, I said. But first, I believe there is one more person you need to see. Renee nodded to the security guard at the door. Send in Mr. Vance. The heavy double doors opened. Derek Vance walked in. He had recomposed himself. He had fixed his tie and smoothed his hair. He walked with the swagger of a man who believed he could talk his way out of a murder charge. He did not look at me. He looked straight at the chairman, flashing a bright, confident smile. Gentlemen, Trina, Renee, Derek said, his voice booming. I am glad we are finally convening. I have prepared a statement regarding the gross negligence of the IT staff. It is truly shocking how deep the incompetence goes. I demand that we take immediate legal action against Ms. Cruz for holding our assets hostage. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Placing his hands on the table, he looked like the king of the world. He did not notice that Mr. Sterling was not looking at him. He did not notice that Trina was refusing to make eye contact, and he certainly did not realize that on the screen behind him, the projector was still displaying the business registry document linking him to OmniStream. Mr. Vance, the chairman said, his voice like grinding stones. You are correct. There has been gross negligence, and we are indeed taking immediate action. Derek smirked, finally glancing at me. See, I told you. Riley, you are finished. I looked back at him. I did not smile. I did not frown. I looked at him with the dispassionate gaze of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. Actually, Derek, I said calmly, I think you should look at the screen behind you. Derek turned. He saw the document. He saw the address. He saw the name of his brother-in-law highlighted in yellow. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical reaction. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked down at his hands, which were suddenly shaking. He had walked in as the boss, but in that moment, he realized what I had known for weeks. He did not have the keys. He did not have the codes. And now, he did not even have a way out. The air in the boardroom was so cold, It felt less like a meeting space and more like a morgue. Derek Vance sat across from me, his hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table until his knuckles turned white. He had stopped looking at the screen behind him, the one that displayed his brother-in-law's name on the vendor registry, but the image seemed to be burned into the retinas of everyone else in the room. Derek decided to play the only card he had left. He decided to play the victim. "This is a witch hunt," Derek declared, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. He looked at the chairman, eyes wide and pleading. "I admit, I may have moved fast. I may have cut a few corners on the paperwork, but I did it for the agility of this company. Ms. Cruz is the real villain here. She orchestrated a complete system blackout. She vindictively locked the administrative controls because she was angry about being let go. She is holding this company hostage, and she is using technical jargon to confuse you." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "Look at her. She is sitting there gloating. She sabotaged my laptop. She sabotaged the network. This is gross misconduct, and she should be arrested, not listened to." Mr. Sterling, the general counsel, did not look up from his notepad. "Are you finished, Mr. Vance?" "No, I am not finished." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "I want her access revoked permanently. I want security to escort her out, and I want the IT department to report directly to me so I can clean up this mess without her interference." Mr. Sterling finally looked up. His eyes were devoid of sympathy. "Ms. Cruz, would you like to respond to the allegation of sabotage?" I stood up slowly. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth has its own volume. "Mr. Vance claims I caused the disruption," I said, turning to the screen. I advanced the slide to the final timeline view. "But the logs tell a different story. At 9 o'clock this morning, per Mr. Vance's direct order, I formally resigned my administrative privileges. I followed the Larkhaven Information Security Policy. Section 4. I transferred the root authority to the compliance vault. I pointed to a specific line on the screen. At 9:05, the system was stable. It was running perfectly. The disruption only occurred at 9:15. That was when Mr. Vance attempted to seize the root authority using a standard user account. When that failed, he instructed an external contractor to use a brute force script to bypass the firewall. That action triggers an automatic defensive lockdown. It is not sabotage. Mr. Vance, it is the digital equivalent of an airbag deploying because you drove the car into a brick wall." Renee Calder nodded in agreement. "I can confirm this," she said, her voice crisp. "The security protocols functioned exactly as designed. If the system had not locked down, the contractor would have had unmonitored access to patient data. Riley did not break the system. She prevented a catastrophic data breach." Derek wiped sweat from his forehead. "That policy is outdated. I told her to update it. She refused because she wanted to trap me." Mr. Sterling reached into his folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printed email. He slid it across the long table toward Derek. "Twist number 9. Mr. Vance," Sterling said coldly. "This is an email you sent to Ms. Cruz 3 days ago. In it, you explicitly stated, and I quote, 'I do not care about the legacy protocols. I want full power immediately. Stop hiding behind compliance.' You copied the entire executive team on this message." Derek stared at the paper. I was emphasizing the need for speed." "You were documenting your own intent to violate federal regulations," Sterling corrected him. "You demanded total control without the requisite clearance. You attempted to bypass the checks and balances that protect this organization." The chairman cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking wood. He looked at Derek with a gaze that could peel paint. "Mr. Vance," the chairman said, "I have a question regarding the logic of your restructuring plan. You terminated Ms. Cruz because you claimed her position was, to use your word, redundant." Derek nodded vigorously, seeing a glimmer of hope. Yes, exactly. She was unnecessary. We can automate her job." "If she is redundant," the chairman asked slowly, leaning forward. Why did you need her specific access privileges the very second she was gone? If her role is useless, why did the entire operational capacity of this firm collapse within 15 minutes of her departure? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was trapped in the logic of his own lie. He had claimed I was nothing, yet he had destroyed his own career trying to steal what I held. Derek stammered. I needed to ensure continuity. You failed, the chairman said. Trina, please read the determination. Trina Sloan stood up. She avoided looking at Derek. Derek Vance, effective immediately. Your employment with Larkhaven is terminated for cause. The specific grounds are attempted fraud, violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, gross negligence regarding vendor management, and creating a hostile work environment. For cause, Derek whispered. That means no severance. No severance, Trina confirmed, and legal reserves the right to pursue damages for the downtime you caused today. Derek looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He slumped back in his chair. The arrogant executive facade completely dissolved. And regarding Ms. Kyla Vance, Trina continued, her contract is also terminated immediately for unauthorized access to sensitive employee files and complicity in bypassing security controls. Security guards had quietly entered the room while Trina was speaking. They stood behind Derek's chair. Please escort Mr. Vance to the exit, the chairman said. Do not let him return to his office. His personal effects will be mailed to him. Derek stood up shakily. He looked at me one last time. There was no hate left in his eyes, only a hollow, confused shock. He still did not understand how a person he deemed redundant had just dismantled his entire life. As the doors closed behind him, the room seemed to get warmer. The tension evaporated. The chairman turned to me. Ms. Cruz, on behalf of the board, I apologize. It appears we were misled regarding the value of your department. We would like to offer you your position back, with a 20% salary increase, retroactive to the beginning of the year. I looked at the chairman, then at Renee, and finally at the blank screen where the timeline had been. I appreciate the offer, I said. But if I come back, it will not be under the operations department. I will not answer to the next Derek Vance you hire. What are your terms? The chairman asked. I report directly to the Chief Information Officer, I said firmly. If that position is vacant, I report to compliance until it is filled. My budget for security tools is restored immediately, and I want a written guarantee that no executive, regardless of rank, can demand access to data they are not authorized to see. If they try, I have the authority to lock them out without fear of termination. The chairman looked at Mr. Sterling. The lawyer nodded. Done, the chairman said. Welcome back, Riley. I spent the next hour fixing the mess. I sat at the head of the boardroom table, my laptop connected to the main line. I revoked the OmniStream credentials. I cleared the blockade on the firewall. I reset the admin hierarchy. One by one, the red lights on the dashboard turned green. The heart of Larkhaven started beating again. When I finally walked out of the building, the sun was setting. The air outside smelled of exhaust fumes and city rain, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my new badge. It had been printed 10 minutes ago. It no longer said, IT Support. It said, Director of Information Security. I looked at the building rising behind me, a glass tower full of people who would never know how close they came to disaster. They would never know about the logs, the dossiers, or the battle that had been fought in the silent language of code and permissions. They thought I was just a fixture. They thought I was furniture. Derek Vance had looked at me and seen something redundant. I swiped my badge at the turnstile one last time just to hear the beep. Beep, green light. I am not redundant, I whispered to the empty lobby. In this world, redundancy is just a backup plan that saves you when the primary system fails. The only thing that was truly redundant here was a leader who thought he was above the rules. I walked out into the cool evening air. Derek Vance was gone. erased from the system like a corrupt file. I was still here, and I still held the keys. Redundancy does not mean useless. It means you are the one thing standing between order and chaos. And today, chaos died first. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect if you enjoyed seeing justice served. Please make sure to subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a little victory in their day.